Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Deborah, aka the Sunset Girl Creates, and today is Friday Crochet and Knit with Me Day. So I'm finishing up the sock and I just have this last section to finish and then I start the toe. So I'm not too far off from being finished. I am using my Goose needles, and I have a stitch marker that I got from one of my yarn dealies, and they just kind of hang. They're really pretty. And then I've got my bag that I use. I guess I'll have to figure out where my bag came from, and I'll look into, I know I have the link to where my yarn is, so I'll make sure that I link the yarn, and I'll link the needles that I'm using. I'm using the Goose, and I thought I'd pull them out and kind of show you what I'm working with. So I have the big Goose sets. But these are the small sets, these are the mini sets. And so they come in two different sizes, right? It comes in a pouch just like this. And it has two different sizes. This one and this one. All the needles are the same size, but it's the length of the needles. So if I take out this 0, which is 2.0 millimeters, and I pull out this 0, and I'll show you the difference. Okay, so this is the difference in the size of the needle. So see how there's two different sizes? And right now I'm currently using the shorter one. I'm using 1.5 millimeter. The shorter one is easier to use when I'm sock knitting, because I can just knit around, right? I don't have to have all the extra cordage because I have it all on the small cord, right? So if I pull out my cords, I have cords that are 5-inch, 6-inch, and 8-inch. So when I go, I'm using the 5-inch right now. And I want to pull out these two, and I want to show you because these are mini cables. So you can see how thin my cables are, right? They're very, very thin with very, very small tips on them. Okay? And so I have these ones. This is my 6 and my 8, right? And the 8 goes here. What I will do, and I've been trying to figure out without having to put on a whole new set of needles just to do the gusset, because the gusset does take it doubles the stitches while you're working the gusset. Okay, so in order to make sure that I have plenty of room to do my gusset, I will use the 8-inch to do the gusset, and then I'll just switch back down to the 5-inch. So I can do 5 or 6-inch, and they will work pretty comfortably the same way. And all I have to do is take my needles and kind of push them down. I have to get around this little stitch marker. There we go. Okay, so we're working on the last set of rounds before we start our toe. And then this sock will be done, okay? So I'm working on this one, and then I have another one to finish, one for my husband. And I always make shorty socks. We're not a big tall sock family. We live in Florida. So this is the sock I'm going for. I have big feet, yes. And so this is the completed sock. And as you can see, I have stitch markers all up and down this side as well as the bottom of the foot, because this tells me how many stitches I have in my total sock up to my toe, right? And this one, these ones tell me this is the end of my gusset, right? And this is the foot. And so I have to get 6 of these on my other sock, and I currently have 5. Okay, so all I'm gonna do, and that 6th one is just the one you get done just before you start the toe. So the toe will start being worked on right away as you drop it. So what we want to do is, I always, on my last round, so I know that I did my 10 and I did it on the 11th one. So I want to look and see, because this is shorter. You can tell between that one and that one is shorter. It's not a full 10 rows, okay? There's 10 rows between this one and this one. So what I need to do is I need to count my rows. So in order to count your rows, you have to find your stitches and you just count. So if I bring the sock up here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows. Okay, so all I have to do is 6 rows. And technically, is that 6? Yeah. Yep, 6 rows, and then we start the toe. So I'm currently going to be reading the article from Zen Garden, knitting-Garden.com, and it's called Swatching, a Knitter's Guide. So what do we need to know about swatching, right? We're all about what we're going to do and what we're going to swatch, and we decide, okay, I want to do a sweater, right? And the thing about sweaters is it is a piece of clothing, and so because it is a piece of clothing, you want to be really careful with it, okay? So being as a piece of clothing, okay, so you're doing a sweater, you want to make sure that that sweater you're making fits, right? And sweater or shirt or whatever garment that you're choosing to make, right? You need to make sure that your tension is right and that you're getting the gauge that the pattern says to get. Okay? So gauge is when it comes to doing, like, well, doing socks is different, okay? It's a piece of clothing, yes. But for socks, I don't need to swatch, okay? Once I know what my tension is on my socks, they'll pretty much stay the same, okay? I'm really good at keeping a consistent tension in my knitting and my crochet, and it took a long time to get the tension the same, right? Takes a lot of practice, and it can be time consuming to learn this, craft, whether it be knitting or crocheting. There's a lot to it. It's not just pick up yarn and a needle or pick up yarn and a hook and get started, right? There's so many things to the fiber arts that you have to remember, especially if you're like knitting and doing those kind of fiber arts. It's really, really, really important that you make sure that your knitting is consistent, right? Because if your knitting is not consistent, you won't get a nice tension, right? And you want, when you're doing knitting, you want your tension to be the same. See how nice and tension that is? See how nice those stitches are? They're nice little stitches, and they're all the same stitches, right? So look at it. The consistency, that's what you're looking for when you're knitting, especially when you're knitting garments, because if you put one too many stitches, right? Let's say your waist is 36, right? I'd love to have a waist of 36. I never will, but let's say you have a waist of 36, right? And the pattern calls that you stitch, let's say 8 stitches per inch, right? And your waist is 36. Let's just do 10 inches because that makes it a little easier for me to do the math quickly in my head. So you have 10 stitches per inch, you have 36, 300, and you have 30 inches. So you have 360 times 3, okay? So you have a little over 1,200 stitches, okay? But say the tension calls for 10 and you do 11. So that's 30 stitches. That's 3 extra inches you're adding to your garment if you don't have the right tension, if you don't have the right gauge within your pattern. The big part of gauge is making sure, a blanket, it doesn't matter, a pot holder, it doesn't matter, gurumi, that doesn't matter. But when you're doing a garment, it is very, very, very important that you swatch. Now, garments don't mean shawls and scarves and stuff like that, because those are adjustable. You can make them any size you want, and based on the pattern, you can do anything you want to it, right? So let's get started on our article. The nice thing is I can knit and I can read at the same time, so that's going to make it a little nicer. You get to watch me deal with all my yarn and its wondrous twisting. That comes from, I had to redo these socks 3 times, right? I didn't like how they were coming out. I did a couple patterns on them and I tried to play with it to kind of put a cool pattern I would like, and I just never liked how it came out. So I just said forget it, and I finally just made a standard basic sock, right? And so I enjoy making my socks. I love socks. They're something I can whip up pretty quickly. They don't take a whole lot of time. They can be done in a matter of days, not months. Like a blanket. Now, blanket, I can't say a blanket takes me months to do, okay? Because typically I can get a blanket done in about a month's time, okay? Socks, if I work on it continuously, I can do one sock in about 3 or 4 days. However, I work on several things at a time throughout the week. So I'm not just concentrating on knitting. I'm not just concentrating on diamond painting. I haven't gotten I got part of the white done yesterday when we got done, and that was about it. I didn't get much done. I worked on my sock yesterday afternoon because I really want to get this one done and move on to the other sock to get it done so I can get to the sweater and finish the sweater. We've already had it once. I will be bringing it back on. It will come back on here once these set of socks are done, probably. I may just bring that out. There's not a whole lot. I really miss my color work. I need to get that done. There's not a whole lot of color work to do. It's just the rest of the sleeve. I think it's like 6 rows. But it's going to be fun. So with the fact of tension and garments and bringing out the sweater, this probably might have been a better article to maybe read during while I was working on the sweater. But socks are a garment and socks are knitting, and really a gauge swatch is part of not only knitting but crochet as well. So if you're crocheting a sweater and you don't do a gauge swatch, you may not have the right amount of yarn. You may have a smaller or a larger garment than other people. Sometimes another thing you can think of, and I'm going to spin my yarn real quick. I've got too much of a twist in it. I'll just sit here. You just won't see. You'll see it spin, okay? So I have to get the twists out of it. All I do is just spin my sock and see how it spins out, and it's getting rid of all those twists. So let's do a little spin on it. This is a little trick that I do. I don't spend a whole lot of time with the yarn when it spins like this. If I hadn't had these already done, I probably would have done something other than socks with this yarn. I would have probably put it into the blanket or something, and what's left may go into a section of the blanket because I really like this color. This pink and this blue is amazing. So, swatching, a knitter's guide. So this is our guide for a knitter, and this can go intertwined with a swatch for crochet as well. Swatching is swatching. It doesn't matter whether you're knitting or crocheting, you're always swatching, right? I don't have a comfortable hold on any of this right now. There we go. So, swatching, that one little word that every knitter dreads. In this post, we talk about why swatching is necessary and share our best tips for swatching so that you can put it in practice for your next project. Okay, so I want to see if I have one thing over here that may help us with something. Something else. And it should be right here. There it is. Okay. Okay, so this is what does Susan Bates call it? The Knit Check, okay? So it's by Susan Bates. It's the Knit Check. It's got 2 different things. So first of all, these are knitting needles. All of these holes are all the knitting needles. So if we look, they have, I don't think they have the one we have on here. We have a 1.5. We don't have a 1. Let's see. So all you do is you take your needle and you poke your needle through, okay? And if it sits comfortably and doesn't wiggle, then it's the correct size. If it doesn't go in, it's too small. But I put in the 2 and the 2 is too big. That's because I have 1.5. Okay? Typical gauge is you knit a 4-piece, 4-inch square. And then in between you can count up and you can count to the side. Okay, so this is one kind of knit check. I'll be right back. I got something to grab. Okay, sorry about that. I wanted to get my Knit Pro, and it's called Gauge Needles and Crochet Hooks. And it goes down to a 2.0. So it's not going to go as small as what I have. But this one is a little different. So let's look at the 2, okay? I just want to show you the 2 kinds. So you have 2 different kinds of gauge rulers, okay? This gauge ruler over here just shows you 2 inches of your section and 2 inches. This one has a 3mm by 10mm, so that's 4 inches by, oh, I don't know. Do we have inches? Let's see. It's about 1.25 inches tall. So 1.25 inches tall and 4 inches. So you can literally count all 4 inches, right? And see, divide it by 4, and that's what your gauge is going to be. The bigger the count, the better off you are. Over here is like a thread cutter in between the nose. So there's a couple different kinds you can get. So I just kind of wanted to show you the gauge rulers and some different kinds of gauge rulers that you can get. Since I do a lot of sweaters and well, it's really just sweaters I do. I do some nice sleeveless tops as well that are more summery. But wintry at the same time, because Florida doesn't always get too cold, but it's cold enough that I need to have a sweater, right? Or if I have a nice sweater tank top or something. Yeah. So I will have to show you some of the garments that I have done. But right now we're just going to get going on this swatching, that little word that every knitter dreads. In this post, we'll talk about why swatching is necessary and share our best tips for swatching so that you can put into practice for your next project. So we want to put it into practice for our next project, okay? So, the why of swatching. Think of swatching like your first date with yarn. Will you like it? Will it behave nicely? Will it make you swoon with delight? Are your yarn and your pattern, are your yarn and your pattern a good match? Let's find out. So you're going to find out based on your yarn and your swatching and your knitting if it's going to be all that, right? So you're testing out your yarn, you're checking your yarn, what's your yarn going to do? Have you ever used that yarn before? Do you know how it reacts? Because every yarn is a little bit different. Every yarn has a little bit of its own thing, right? Depending on what kind of yarn, whether you're using wool, whether you're using bamboo, whether you're using cotton, whether you're using acrylic. There are so many kinds of yarns out there, and they all do different things. Okay, so swatching is the process of testing the way in which you knit a stitch pattern, a yarn, and a specific needle size. So you're going to take your yarn, and you're going to take the needles that are recommended in the pattern, and you're going to take that knit pattern. If it's all one stitch, then it's easy. But if you have a pattern, you want to make sure you get that pattern in there as well, so that you make sure you're getting the right count and that you're counting what your pattern says you need to have, right? Because sometimes when you're doing a pattern, your tension may be different than when you're not doing a pattern, okay? So keep that in mind, okay? This allows you to measure gauge. So how many stitches and how many rows per inch you get with that pattern and yarn on a specific needle size. So how many stitches do you get per inch? Or how many stitches do you get per row? Okay, so do I know exactly how many stitches I get in my socks? I don't know. Let's count. So what you do is I'm going to show you, well, let me get away from the, I'm just going to put it on the main part of the sock so you can see a good view. So here's what we do. We're going to line up our gauge ruler to a row and make sure our stitches are nice and lined up. Okay, if you can find one with color and it's easy to spot, then that's a good one to start with. So all you do is, I'm trying to hold this into place so I can actually hold it into place and count at the same time without it falling. Okay, so we're going to do our best. And I'm going to be doing some how-to videos very soon, so you'll really get the how-to. But basically, you line it up and you start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I get 8 stitches per inch. Okay, and if I want how many rows I get per inch, I do the same thing, but I'm going to count up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 rows. So I get 12 rows per inch. I'm sorry, I was counting to the side. So you get 12 rows per inch, okay? So 8 stitches per inch with 12 rows per inch. That's my gauge, okay? So that's what your gauge is. And that's with 1.5 millimeter needles, okay? And these are, I know they're 1.5, but they're always hard. Let me check something. They're 1.5 or a 1. So they're 2.25 is, or no, 2.5 or a 1.5 is the one I'm using. The other socks I have, I'm using the 1 on it, okay? So it really determines your stitches, right? I have that other sock. So let's see what the difference between a 1 and a 6, okay? So these are much smaller, even harder to read stitches. So if you look here, see how much smaller they are? And because of the way the variances in the yarns, it really helps define and hide the definitions of those stitches, okay? So this one's going to be a little harder to read and define our stitches, but I think I'll be able to do it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stitches per inch. So just changing from a 1 to a 1.5 is the difference of 1 stitch per inch. So that means on this one, I need more stitches to go around for the same size sock that's going to fit this, right? Because, and that might be, because this looks like a much smaller sock, and it is not supposed to be a smaller sock. And so that's probably what we're going to end up with. I will see how it works, but it's got a really nice defined ribbing on it around the top. So I did a ribbing on the top. So it's just a straight, I think it's 3x4. Yeah, 3x3 rib. So I did a 3x3 rib all down the front. Okay, which gives it a lot of stretch, okay? That rib adds stretch to a smaller sock. So remember that with your yarn. And when you're doing your gauge swatch, see how much that yarn moves, okay? So there's a difference. So this is 9 stitches per inch. And let me see if I can get the rows just out of curiosity. It's kind of hard to see the stitch definition. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I had 12 on the other, 12 rows per inch on here. This one's 15 rows per inch, okay? So that's the difference between doing a gauge swatch. So now can you see how it can make a difference? Right? So if I did this sock with the same amount of stitches as this sock, which it looks like I probably did, I did. I can look at it and just gauge. They're probably both 80s. But because of the ribbing, it's smaller. So by doing the exact same thing that I've done on all the others, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 15 rows per inch. This is 12 rows per inch. And look at it. Same amount of stitches, different needles. So can you see why you need to gauge swatch? I did this for a reason, to show you a point. These socks here are not going to fit my husband most likely because they're too small. These ones will fit him better. So I'll probably get these ones and he'll get these ones because I don't wear socks. He wears more socks. So the point of it is that you really need, even with socks, and this goes to show even with socks, you may not need a gauge swatch, but you must be consistent. When you're trying to do the same thing over and over and over and over again, always use the same needle over and over and over again. You'll get the same results. But if you do the different needles, and that's the same tension, the tension's not any different. It's really the difference between how big. Let me see. I'll tell you how big of a centimeter the difference is in the hook, okay, in the needle. Because this is the interesting part. You saw the difference in size, okay? The ones are 2.25 millimeters. The 1.5s are 1.5 millimeter, or 2.5 millimeters. So that's only a 1/4 of a millimeter difference. Okay, and the smaller ones, you have more leeway in the numbers and going from 1 to 1.5 and 2 to 2.5. As you get bigger, you're going to have single numbers. You're not going to have the 1.5s, okay? So it's just remember that it is important, okay? So generally speaking, the needle, generally speaking, the smaller the needle, the more stitches per inch you'll get. And the larger the needle, the fewer stitches you'll get. So we just proved that, right? 13 to 10. Or 11 to 10, something like that, right? Swatching tells you a few important things. Your gauge will estimate how big your project will be after you knit it. Okay, so you can determine the size of your project based on, I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. I had a nail come loose, and I just put them on, so I wanted to make sure they didn't fall off. So I just put them on. I had fun doing that this morning. I put a couple different colored glitters in with my blues to kind of change it up, do something a little different. So, swatching tells you a few important things. Your gauge will let you estimate how big your project will be after you've knitted. This is especially important if you're working on projects that are more fitted like garments, to ensure that after you spend those long painstaking hours knitting or crocheting, you don't end up with a garment that's too small or too large. Okay? So you don't want something that's too small or too large, right? When you're making something, you want to make something so it fits you, right? Because that's the goal, is to have your garment fit you. You're not making it so it can fit somebody else, right? You're making it so it can fit you. And so that's the whole point, okay? It's really, what do you need to do to make your garment fit, right? Do you need to try it on every 30 rows? No. Do you have to try it on every 20 rows? No. If you do a proper gauge swatch and you're knitting what you're knitting, you'll know what your gauge is, right? Now, another thing is, once you've done a gauge swatch with a certain set of needles and a certain type of yarn, a lot of times you can do a quick one and just double check to make sure that you're still on target, and then you can get started, okay? So, swatching also tells you what kind of fabric you're going to get. Oh, okay, I split my yarn. Hold on a second. There we go. Swatching tells you what kind of fabric you're going to get when using a set pattern, yarn, and needles. So if you're knitting a drapey shawl, you don't want to end up with fabric that's stiff and unwieldy. While the content of your fiber can contribute to this, you also want to be sure that the specific gauge you're getting a fabric that you like and is comfortable for you. So you may choose out a beautiful yarn because you want to use that yarn to make a sweater, right? And I have some nice Malabrigos in there that I want to make a sweater out of. Just haven't found the right project yet. And you need to be able to enjoy the wear of that fabric. So let me go back to the socks, okay? These are two different kinds of yarns, right? Let me show you. This one is just a wool, right? It's just colored wool with the sparkle in it, okay? And then this is not wool. This is bamboo, okay? This is a bamboo yarn, and it's all over the place. That's the end. It's like all over the place. I gotta fix it. It's driving me crazy. I can do that quickly. Okay, so this yarn is a little different. So if you look at this yarn, excuse me, it is a looser. Oops, you can't see it very well. Let me put it up here so you can see it. So it is a looser spun bamboo, so it's like a thicker yarn, but it knits up beautifully for socks. So I have a new sock started. Like, I think I'm only on row 2 or 3 of it, and I'll probably start it over just because at this point it's been a long time since I did it and I don't have many rows in, so I probably will do a new cast on just so that I can make sure, because this is harder yarn to read, and my eyes are getting older as I go. I could kind of read it. I'll look at it. But anyways, the point is that this one is it's pliable. It falls, right? It's kind of drapey. But this one, look at how drapey that fabric is. You know? It just kind of drapes. This one you have to really bend more. This drapes. So there's different ways that yarn works, right? Finally, swatching helps you determine how to proceed and gives you an indication if you have enough yarn to complete your project. I'm just trying to put this mess back in here. I will have to organize it shortly. I did not realize it had such a mess, or I'd have never pulled it out. But that's what happens sometimes. And if you ever get like an area of yarn that's all tattered up like this, be patient with yourself. Watch where the yarn goes and untie it carefully so you don't put knots in it, right? So make sure when you're untying that you're getting it in the right position, okay? And that you're not gonna put knots in your yarn, because knots in your yarn are awful. Right? And this is just because it looks like this yarn is twisted a little bit. And so being twisted, it likes to twist around things. So you just have to be careful, right? It's all about being careful. And I need to pull the ball out because that's the last little bit to fix it, right? Let's ball around. There we go. I just want to pull it taut so I can see where I need to put my ball when I unwrap it. So see how easy that was to get that to come undone? Okay, so it's as simple as things like that, and just be patient with yourself. I probably changed my thing. So let's see, complete a project. For instance, you may decide that a given gauge doesn't create a fabric that you like. Perhaps it's too airy, or you'd rather knit a little more densely. In this case, you would go down a needle size. Okay? You go down a needle size. You decide the yarn isn't the right fit for the pattern, or you decide to proceed to make adaptations as you go. Smaller, knit a small size of the sweater at a larger gauge. Or knit a larger sweater at a smaller gauge to create a garment that is just right for you. But if you choose to deviate from the pattern, you may need more or less yarn that a pattern calls for. So if you're going to be changing your gauge on a pattern, if you take it down a needle size to make it a smaller pattern, then you'll end up with a smaller project, okay? If you do it with a larger needle size or larger gauge, it will be bigger. So just be careful when you're modifying that you're going in the right direction, okay? So really, swatching is the key, right? After you have your first date swatch, you can decide if it's a match you'd like to pursue, or if you're ready to find another fish or a pattern in the sea. So is it something that you want? So you have to decide, is it the yarn you want to use so badly, or is it the pattern you want to make so badly? Okay, because that can make a difference, right? If your material doesn't turn out like you want it to look, then what next? What's next? The next thing is you re-swatch it. Choose a different needle depending on where the swatch is, okay? If it's a pattern that you really want, then find a way to make that go down a needle size or up a needle size to make that pattern, that gauge to where it needs to be in order to make that pattern. So it's really up to you which one you want to switch out, okay? So just keep trying and keep working with it till you find what you're looking for, okay? So, swatching in action. To illustrate our point, we've knit some swatches using the same yarn, the same pattern, and different needles to create a variety of swatches so you can see the difference. We used a sock blank, which is made out of our delightfully squishy, super soft, super fine fingering weight base. 90% merino, 10% nylon. And has the same length as our skeins, 400 yards or 366 meters. As you can see, the recommended needle size for the sock blank, presuming you're going to knit socks, is 1 to 3. 2.25 to 3.25 millimeters needles. All our swatches are 40 stitches wide and 28 rows tall. Okay, so now we know what the swatches are, okay? They're 40 inches wide and 28 rows. So they did 40 rows back and forth 28 times, okay? And that makes your swatch. So we started at a US 2, which is 2.25 needle, and you can see when we knit on small needles, we get more stitches per inch and create a very dense fabric for socks. We want our fabric to be sturdy, so this is a great idea. So all they're doing is, they have them Knitter Pride elephant, but theirs is brown and mine's purple, okay? I am going to show you these pictures just so you can kind of see what they're talking about as we go. So here's the first swatch that they knitted up, right? And they've now put it in the gauge. So it says if we go up a few needle sizes to a number 4, we get more open gauge and a more drapey fabric. This might be ideal for knitting a sweater or other garment where we want more give to the fabric. So see, you can already tell this is the first swatch. And let me see, I got a glare on here. Let me see if I turn this light off, if it'll help. Okay, that helps some. You can't see my face, but you can see the picture. I'll turn it back on in a second. So you can see the different sizes of the two fabrics, right? They're both the same fabric. They're just different size needles. Okay, turn it back on for a minute. Okay, if we go a few more needle sizes to number 6, we get fewer stitches per inch, which creates a fabric with a lot more space where you can see room between the stitches. You'll often find shawls and other accessories knit with large gauges, either to display lace or other pattern attributes, or to make a single skein stretch to make a large project. So now we have, let me turn our light back off. let's get it off. Okay, we have a even bigger swatch. So see the two swatches, see that swatch and see the size? It's gotten bigger, huh? Because we've used a bigger needle. It's the same yarn. Do you see how one needle size can change your project? See, and that's one thing that when I first started knitting and crocheting, and I started back when I was 8 years old, okay? And I'm getting ready to teach my 7-year-old granddaughter to crochet. And so she wants to do hats and scarves. So I'm going to, you're going to see me, you might see me, I don't know. I've got to knit up a couple hats real quick. I'm probably going to have to put the socks down and knit a couple hats real quick. I need new head sizes for the kids so they can have their new hats for the winter time. I've got to get a hold of their grandmother so I can make sure they get their new hats. So, and that goes to say the same thing. When you want a hat, it's different, right? Because it's going around your head. You want it to fit tight, but not too tight, right? So there's a balance. All the above have been knit with the same fingering weight yarn, but produce very different gauges. So I want to show you the 3 final gauge swatch. These are the final 3 gauge swatches, okay? So we look here, and we can see them. Smaller needle, biggest needle in the swatches. You can see the sizes. You can see the type of fabric, okay? The point is to show you the differences that can be done and the size differences just by changing a needle size by 0.25 millimeters. You're looking for a small sock. But if you're doing it in a smaller one, you're still going to get a smaller sock, right? I wasn't thinking about that when I made that sock. I usually do 1.5s, and I picked up the 1s for some reason on that. And when I picked up the 1s, instead of knitting them and getting them done, I got one done, and now I realized that I pulled it out. Now I'm going to have to try it on. That's one thing nice about socks is when you're doing socks, you can try them on as you go. Okay? If I had a little bit more room on my needles, a bigger, maybe if I put in the 6 instead of the 5-inch, it might give me a little bit more room to try it on. However, I know the other one fits, and this is just an exact replica of it, so I'm okay. But when I'm like doing the first sock, I do a lot of charging as we go. So this is the end of it. So we hope this post inspires you to spend a little time swatching before tackling those large projects. If you have further questions or would like to share your projects with us, please follow us at Zen Yarn Garden, or join our Facebook group, or tag photos with hashtag Zen Yarn Garden. So I think what we're going to get started doing, and I think what I'm going to do is after the holidays get done, is, and here comes the dog. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that. Dog's been put back on the floor, and we won't have the glare on the camera. Today seems to be quite a sunny day. I haven't cracked the blinds yet. I will be doing that shortly. But we can see the sun coming through the blinds behind the couch. So I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about swatching and about how the needle size can determine what you're working on and what the size of your project will end up being. And I hope with all this said that you really take into heart, if you're going to be doing some kind of garment, to put that garment, and before you start it, do yourself a favor and do a gauge swatch and really make sure that you're capturing the size you're looking for, because it can make a big difference. We've seen the differences. So try it out, and just because somebody knits a 6-inch gauge doesn't mean that that's going to be you're going to use the same needle to get the same 6-inch gauge, okay? 6 stitches per inch. So with that said, if you like this video, a thumbs up would be great. If you don't, a thumbs down's fine, but let us know in the comments below why. And yes, I said below. Silly me. Let's go ahead, and if you want to be part of the Sunset Girl Creates family, we would love to have you come knit and craft and do all kinds of fun stuff with us. So come on and join our channel. All you have to do is hit the subscribe button down below, and right next to it is a bell icon. All you have to do is select that bell icon. It will let you know every time I upload a video. So with that said, I want to thank you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful Friday, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.